The Honourable Member Honourable Minister Jonathan Coleman.
Mr Speaker, there's some interesting characters in this parliament, and you've just heard from one of them. That was the NZ First MP from the North Shore. And I tell you, it'll be really interesting to see him front up to Korean Day in a couple of weeks' time and tell the Korean voters of the North Shore that he doesn't want them to be able to buy a house on the North Shore. I don't think he'll be invited to Chinese New Year at Northcote this weekend, because they won't want to hear that sort of xenophobic rant either. There was so much wrong with that speech, it's hard to know where to start. But one thing I did pick up is that New Zealand First today have announced a community wage. Of course, it's completely uncosted, but you can heap that on to the other heap of 750 million uncosted promises which Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First have announced, and we're not even at Waitangi Day. Of course, there's some other pretty interesting members in this parliament as well. I was sitting in my electorate office the other day doing my electorate work when this red van went by with MP for Te Atatu on the front of it, and I thought, this is a long way from Phil Twyford's stamping ground. But what I found out was Mr Twyford's been doing a kayak tour of the Waitemata Harbour to test water quality, when really all he needed to do was log on to the council website. But I guess when you're in opposition, there's very few ways to productively use your time, so you might as well just go kayaking and pretend it's work. But neither of those two are quite as interesting as that shaven-headed whack job that was on the TV last night. He was a member who, frankly, I thought once had a great future, but for him the future ain't what it used to be. And that was the member for Dunedin North, David Clark, who was there. He looked like he'd just drunk Jim Jones' Kool-Aid, pronouncing that Labour would ban Facebook. They'd ban Facebook. So if you don't comply with what Labour wants, if you're not falling into line, they'll ban you. So they'll ban Facebook. They'll probably ban the North Shore, because the North Shore's not going to fall into line with what Labour wants. They'll probably ban for 50% of the national electorate, because they certainly don't agree with the Labour Party either. But neither or none of those three members are quite as interesting as the leader of the Labour Party, who yesterday announced the worst start policy. That is worst start for Labour's year in Parliament. It was really, well, it was a couple of days ago, his State of the Nation speech. David Cunliffe has actually misled the public of New Zealand, because he said that anyone having a baby earning a household income of less than $150,000 would get $60 in the hand. And I guess a lot of people thought, well, that was pretty good. But unfortunately, the fine print wasn't included with that policy. And as Patrick Gower has written today, well, his opinion is that Labour's been dishonest. Those are Patrick Gower's words, not mine. His opinion is that Labour have misled the electorate, because when you look at it, if you're getting paid parental leave for 26 weeks, you don't get the $60 till after that's over. And now, that was yesterday's revelation. Today we find out that also on top of that, if you're getting the in-work tax credit for working for families, you don't get it either. So David Cunliffe went out there yesterday and he was here doing his opening address for the year, all being all sort of faux blokey, you know, leaning on the desk like this, like he's leaning on the public bar. I don't think they have public bars in his part of the woods. That's Herne Bay, not actually his electorate. But he has been misleading the public of New Zealand. So the more David Cunliffe talks, the more the public's going to find out what's going on. And you see, the real problem for David Cunliffe is, fundamentally, I don't think he believes in a lot of the policies that he is being forced to announce. So he came in with this big left-wing backing from the unions, and he knows that $60 a week. Do you know what? When my child was born, when I was a backbencher, I would have qualified for that $60 a week payment. That is ridiculous. That is not targeted, good public spending. That is crazy stuff. And the electorate is not going to be impressed by that. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fence, we've got the Prime Minister's statement yesterday, a very coherent, concise, well-reasoned explanation of the government's program. And that's the truth of it. And we have focused on the things that matter to New Zealanders. So we've had our 4 priorities. So, growing the economy, sound fiscal management, better public services, rebuilding Christchurch. We have focused on those relentlessly. And in the end, I can tell you, take a tip, the public vote on those things that really matter to them. So it's the economy, it's being able to get to the hospital when you need to, it's being able to feel safe in your own home, and it's being able to ensure that your child is going to a school where you feel confident in the educational management. That's what we are focusing on, and that's where Labor has lost the plot. And I tell you what, those members know it, because actually they're not united on the approach they should take. They've gone further and further to the left over time. And actually, if you're going to grab those middle New Zealand votes, that is not going to work, I can tell you that. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens this year, because there are two clear sides to the argument. There's a government that's stuck to its priorities, that's presided over 3.5% economic growth over the last year, that has a firm plan for the way ahead, that actually does what it says it's going to do. And then on the other hand, you have a Labor Party who will be in cahoots, in coalition with the Greens, who are going to be there, if they ever get on the Treasury benches, spending and spending and spending more money that they don't have. And it's going to be bad. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So David Cunliffe, he has already said, well, we're going to scrap the GST off fruit and vegetables plan, and we're going to scrap getting rid of that tax-free first $5,000. So he reckons that's going to free up $1.5 billion to spend. Well, that's about as silly as someone walking down the street here in Wellington, seeing a nice suit or a nice dress or whatever in the window of a shop and saying, I'm not going to buy that, so by doing that I've actually saved the amount of money that I would have spent otherwise. So it's false money, because actually there is no GST revenue to spend. There is no tax-free threshold to remove. So these guys are playing with phony money, and they don't understand that. What they also don't understand is that actually when you make spending promises, the money comes from somewhere, and I can tell you where it comes from. It comes from taxpayers' pockets. And what these people don't understand, because this is the best job they'll ever have, being backbench MPs in this parliament, they don't understand that the wealth in New Zealand is created by entrepreneurial people who go out there, who take a risk, who create jobs and actually stimulate the economy. Now what the Greens want to do, they want to saddle the average New Zealand household with a $500 increase in the energy bill that household will have every year. Okay? These guys over here, the Labor Party, they want to put up the top personal tax rate. And I tell you what, this Bad Start program, that will be paid by increasing taxes. In the meantime, they're going to be increasing the gap between the company tax rate and the top personal rate. And what that will do, that will encourage tax avoidance. So I can tell you, on the one hand, you've got a very coherent set of policies, you've got a very solid record, you've got a brilliant Prime Minister in John Key who understands the electorate, who understands what is needed to get the economy going forward. And if you don't believe me, look at Moody's rating yesterday on the New Zealand economy. We're in the top 10 developed economies in the world, and we're progressing on the right track. The alternative is an incoherent tax and spend profligate group of people with vastly different approaches to life. You know, Honi Harawira, the right wing of the Labor Party, the left wing core of the Labor Party, and frankly the crazy Green Party. Who do you think the public are going to choose? The future for New Zealand is with the solid, dependable path to growth that the national government under Prime Minister John Key represents, and I totally affirm his statement.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. I call the whistle wall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my